Hello, my name is Jonah Primo, and welcome to the Overexamined Life, a place for bite-sized wisdom from the world's most interesting and unique minds. My guest today is David Mcmahon, a naturalist and adventurer who has spent his life exploring the world's most remote ecosystems. David has traveled the globe, coming face to face with some of the most dangerous species on the planet, learning survival techniques from local and indigenous communities, and passing on his knowledge to anyone brave enough to visit the harsh habitats he calls home. In our conversation, David said he could be happy anywhere in the world. He knows the secret to fulfilment. I think everyone can learn a lot from Dave. Enjoy the chat. David, I'm just so honored to have you here because you have such a spectacular way of capturing the natural world in all its glory and horror, and then at the same time somehow imparting the information in a gentle and informative way. You have a completely unique style. I was just watching your Going Bush in Kenya short film, and oh my God, there was this footage of the cheetah mum teaching her cheetah cubs how to hunt baby gazelle. I mean, it was absolutely magnificent footage, but it was also completely heartbreaking. So I just thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So could you briefly describe what it is you do?
Yeah. Well, for the last, coming up 15 years now, I've been head tour guide for a small family-owned tourism company in Arnhem Land and the Kimberley, mostly Arnhem Land through the top end of the Kimberley. And we take really small groups of people, so maximum 6 people on expeditions through culture and country. We've got really unique access to some of the most remote, wild parts of Northern Australia, and it's been a privilege of a lifetime to spend so long out in places like Arnhem Land with Aboriginal people, Binning and Noor and Arakbi, different Aboriginal people, learning country and then being able to take small groups of guests from around the world on these phenomenal expeditions and share a bit of knowledge and country.
Yeah, wow. And how did you end up in this line of work?
Well, it feels like a lifetime ago. I was actually a fine dining chef. I worked in some flash restaurants.
Really?
Down in Adelaide. Yeah. So I grew up in the south of Adelaide. And back then, went through all the hardships of an apprenticeship and worked in some really hectic restaurants, like the typical hectic stuff that you hear about in kitchens, with some kitchens, yelling and screaming, all that sort of thing. It's just horrible sort of situation, especially as a young apprentice when you're trying to cut your teeth. But then I also had the experience of working in some really phenomenal restaurants where the whole team came together. We were the hottest restaurant in Adelaide at the time and doing hundreds of covers a day and really pumping out some very high quality food. That was extraordinary. But back then, every spare second I had, I put the canoe on the roof and head out bush. And then about 15, 16 years ago, I have an auntie in Arnhem Land. She's working as a nurse in a remote Aboriginal community. And my uncle's running a boat for a small tourism company up in Arnhem Land. I thought, what an opportunity to get into a part of Australia so few people get to see. So I took a break from chefing, always planned on going back, bought a 80 series 4-wheel drive and drove up through the guts, right up through the centre, into Arnhem Land. My first experience in the territory is rocking up into an Aboriginal community out in the west of Arnhem Land. And then just sitting there having a cup of tea and looking out over this spectacular billabong and watching a crocodile eat a fish and just thinking, where have I landed? And went up to Venture North, the company I'm now head guide for. Went up to their coastal camp and my uncle was running the boat for them. Started a few cogs turning in the head thinking, guiding can be a job and a lifestyle. I watched the guides come in with the guests and thought, this is a job. I thought, actually, you must have to study and there must be all these qualifications you need. Looked into it and really all you need is enthusiasm and the ability to think on your feet. And I jumped straight into guiding. That was 15 years ago and I've never looked back. I could never step back in a kitchen now. It's been an incredible learning journey and just such a phenomenal lifestyle.
What a beautiful story to just find your passion in that way. It sounded like you were already itching to get out of the city.
Oh, without a doubt. As I said, every spare second since I can remember, I've been in the bush. Even if it's just a patch of bush surrounded by suburbs, like an old valley of old red gums or something. I've always sought out those little wild places.
What about them, like, are you drawn to? Like, what, as a kid, did you see something in the natural wildlife that you just couldn't get somewhere else?
Oh, absolutely. I always remember every time I'm in a wild place, just the lights turn on and all of a sudden I'm so engaged and interested, whether it's an ant crawling up a tree and think, oh, what's he doing? Or just those little things. There's around every corner, there's something to ask a question. There's something to look at and think, what is that? Why is that? And I've just been engaged with that sort of stuff. And the other big thing that always drew me to the bush was looking for snakes. So that's just something since I can remember. I've just absolutely loved reptiles. Absolutely, I've scared the heck out of mum and dad. But yeah, I'd be out in the bush catching brown snakes, or just something that from the time I can remember, I've just had a real passion and love for.
That's incredible. So where's home now? What feels like home? Because you're a nomad of sorts, right? You're traveling all around the world. You're getting into these bush places. Is Adelaide still home, or is the bush home?
The bush is home. I mean, the top end in general. Right now I'm over in Queensland, but I'm having a break from home.
You're having a break. This is
The
a holiday.
territory. Yeah, yeah. I mean, since I've started guiding, I've worked maximum 8 or 9 months, and then I take 3 or 4 months off. So I've always had this time off where I can go and travel the world and explore or do something completely different. But home, without a doubt, the top end, Arnhem Land, it feels like home. It's where I really feel a sense of place.
That's incredible. I mean, like, you're in an interesting position because you're living amongst nature in these remote, isolated places, and it kind of raises the question about whether you're more connected to the world or less. I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel more connected to the world? Like, does being connected to nature sort of offset the maybe the isolation that you get from not being in a city?
I definitely feel more connected to the world, but more in the sense of the natural world. I always have this real sense that, society in general, as time goes on, we get less and less connected with the natural world, and we forget that concept that we're just one animal on a planet full of animals. And when you're around majority one species, so when humans are only around other humans and miss out on the interaction with the wild world, I think we start to think that we're more important. But when you're in the natural world, and when you're constantly surrounded by crocodiles and buffalo and whatever it is, you're part of a greater system, and it really reminds you that you're just one cog in the gear.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, you operate in a world where nature actually hasn't been defeated by humanity, which is like unlike a city where we've sort of paved over everything and tried to get rid of every dangerous animal. You're face to face with danger and deadly animals like crocodiles and buffalo, and also extreme heats and weather patterns. And what do you think that teaches you? Just being face to face with things that can kill you.
I think it teaches you to be a part of the system, because it's not a dangerous place. The top end, when you look from the outside looking in, we've got crocodiles, we've got snakes, you've got all of these potentially deadly things, big cyclones, box jellyfish, the list goes on. But when you're up there living in that and you understand those dangers, they're actually not dangers anymore. Crocodiles live in the water, we live on land, so we just stay away from the water. Snakes, when you've spent time living and working with snakes, you see a snake, you go, oh, there's a snake. It looks at you, stand still, watch it, it moves on. These things that sound scary, once you've lived with them and you're a part of that system, it just doesn't, it's not dangerous, and it certainly doesn't feel dangerous.
Really? Really? So if I come face to face with a crocodile, I guess the obvious solution is get the hell out of there, right? It's that simple.
Yeah, the reality is if you've come face to face with a crocodile, you've already done something wrong. So that they're an aquatic predator. They live in the water. They hunt right in the water or on the edge of the water. So if you give yourself a couple of meter buffer zone, and remember that in Northern Australia, S-giant crocodiles, they live out in the ocean. They live way up in the rivers. Every bit of water has the potential for a croc. And when you start looking at the bush in a different way, there's places you can swim, but there's loads of places, beautiful water, you can't swim. The beach doesn't belong to us. It's one thing I always rock up and say, what a shame you can't swim. And the first thing I say is, if you want to go somewhere tropical where you can swim, go to somewhere like Thailand or Bali in Indonesia. they used to have crocodiles. Populations grow up. There's no longer a place for crocodiles, and now you can swim in any of those beaches. And they say, "Oh, yeah, but there's people." And that's the key thing. Where Northern Australia is still so wild. It's what the world was like before we grew up in populations too big, where wildlife no longer has a place, and you just got to figure out workarounds.
That is such a beautiful insight, and I'm definitely guilty of assuming the earth belongs to me. Like, I mean, I think about it all the time, like, especially when I live in Sydney and always going to these beaches, and I'm like, what do you mean I have to get out of the water at sunset? I don't want to deal with sharks, and I've been on the anti-shark camp, but for no reason other than just assuming it's my right to own the beach. But I've never thought of it that way, and it's so obvious. It's so obvious, and such a beautiful way to connect with the earth is to think about how we're supposed to share it.
Yeah, I mean, humans have been here hundreds of thousands of years. Things like sharks and crocodiles, in some form, we're talking hundreds of millions of years. And for most of that time, humans and sharks and humans and crocodiles have coexisted as part of the system. It's only this really short window in humanity where we've grown up and we've created these cities where all of a sudden those dangers seem so foreign, and we don't really understand the dangers anymore. We don't understand what living with sharks is like, that it becomes an imposition. We've come from a period not too long ago where it was just kill them all, and now we're protecting them, and we're trying to find that balance again. Okay, now things like crocodiles are coming back in their natural numbers. How do we as people fit into that system?
So that's in terms of, like, let's say, the fauna. What about in terms of perceiving other things differently? Like, do you think you perceive time differently to the guests and the tourists you help teach? Do you think there's some sort of different experiential way of connecting with the world or perception?
One thing I notice on tours is so the majority of our tours say 5 days. That's a pretty standard length. Some longer, some shorter. But at the end of 5 days, guests go, wow, that feels like a lifetime ago that we were picked up in Darwin, and here we are back in Darwin. Often on holidays, it flies by. But I remember reading something as a study into psychology, and they were looking at the psychology of time, how we perceive time, and figuring that the more new experiences we have, the longer time feels. So, you're a kid, the summers seem to last forever. You constantly, everything you're seeing is a new experience. You're learning lots. And then as you get older, you get in a rut of doing the same things every day, and all of a sudden the years fly by. I think living in a job and living in a place where you're constantly having new experiences and constantly learning, for guests it seems like a long time, but for me as well, like, the years don't seem to fly by. If I think back to the start of the year, it seems like a really, really long time ago. And I have clear memories of, say, chefing, where, years flew by. You go, oh, it's Christmas already. It doesn't happen anymore.
That's incredible. I've never heard an adult say that time hasn't been getting faster. I've literally never heard that before.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's got to be something in that. And if there is, then, that's a little hack to making your life longer.
Yeah, it's an incredible hack.
Throw yourself into as many new experiences as possible and try to learn new things every day. And it doesn't go by as quick.
That is incredible. That is an incredible insight. What else can we learn? I mean, like, I heard from a friend who was working in Darwin that, a lot of people in the Outback had a fundamentally different way of using the land to derive information. For example, like, certain flowers blooming could indicate an upcoming rain, or certain bird songs indicate some sort of food nearby. What are some different ways that we can understand and connect with the land or the weather or food that we've sort of grown out of as a civilized society?
Well, every indigenous country in Australia, so over 350 different language groups, all these countries and dialects, every one of those countries has their own seasonal calendar. So we brought over a European idea of a calendar system. Summer, autumn, winter, and spring. We're taking a European idea and bringing it into a whole new continent. But for Aboriginal people, I know, places down south in the Grampians, they have 6 seasons. Larrakia have 7 seasons. In Kakadu, they have 6 seasons. down in Catherine, a couple of 100 kilometres south, it's 5 seasons. So they have a very different idea of seasons. And rather than tying it in with a calendar month, you let the bush tell you when the seasons change. So it might be a flowering plant. So a plant flowers at the same time where a bird migrates and comes in. And you go, okay, we're coming out of Yagé season, the early dry, into what again? The cold weather season. And that's not the same every year, but it always coincides with these environmental triggers. And it allows you to map the different seasons throughout the years, but also it allows for things like even anthropomorphic climate change, human climate change. You don't need to convince Aboriginal people that the climate's changing quicker than it ever has, because those systems that they've been tracking for literally thousands of generations, it's getting out of balance. And you go, wow, that migratory bird species is rocking up earlier every year and we've never seen it. You're really in tune to that natural world. And you do look at the bush completely differently. It's a tool shop, a pharmacy, and it's your calendar. It's everything. Everything you need to know is looked after in the natural world.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And while you're out there in the natural world, do you think it's made you appreciate modern comforts more, or do you think it's had like the opposite effect? You've realized you don't need modern comforts to be happy.
Yeah, definitely the latter. The more time I spend out bush, the less I realize I need. And when I get back into town, I don't go, oh, great, an air conditioner and a comfy bed. When you've got a good swag and you've spent those perfect, comfortable nights under the stars, and you realize that you're really comfortable with nothing. I've gone months at a time without a proper shower. That's where wet wipes and things come in handy. But you think, wow, I've been for weeks with only the water that I've had to drink. You think these things are a luxury, they're not a necessity, and there is a way to live where they don't actually add any benefit to the day-to-day. You're happier to have all of these creature comforts. I know it's very different when you're living in a modern setting. You can't expect anyone to have that stuff taken away, because then that would be a deprivation. But in the bush, it just feels different.
So if I offered you a $20 million penthouse in Manhattan, the only rule is that you have to live and work in New York, would you take it?
No. If I could sell it, I'd sell it and buy a block of land. And
you can sell it, but you still have to live and work in New York.
That'd be a hard one, because I could sell it, buy land and donate it to conservation, which would be a big benefit. I mean, to be honest, like I could live anywhere. I could live in New York.
Yeah.
I'd find those natural spaces and I'd make the most of it.
Wow.
I've spent a lot of time in cities, in big cities in India and all around the world. And I find everywhere I go, I find something of interest, whether it's food or culture or people. There's always something different.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've asked that question to a few guests, and I'm yet to have anyone take me up on it. So I'm wondering if I need to sweeten the deal somehow. But you're the first person to say you can make the most of the spot. Like, that's quite an interesting insight. That's
one thing I'm sure of. I'd be happy anywhere in the world. I mean,
really,
I've been to so many different corners of the world where people are living such vastly different lives, even, what we call slums in Africa or India. But you sit there and talk to people and think, I could live here. Absolutely. There's a limit where people don't have enough food day to day. If you literally don't have enough food to survive, then that's a deprivation that you wouldn't wish on anyone.
Well, what's your secret? Why would you be able to live in a slum in, let's say, Johannesburg or something?
Because my experience is the people there are generally happier than people in big cities that have everything. The general happy well-being. I mean, there's always going to be people are wanting for more, but people want for more anywhere.
Why are they happier?
I think it's a sense of community. So you live in those places, everybody knows each other. You wake up every day, you've got something to do. You're in charge of your own life, whether that's putting food on the table or, doing whatever it takes, but you've got autonomy and you've also got community. Well, I think they're things, especially community, I think they're things that we're lacking a bit in the modern world. You have to sort of seek out and find community. It doesn't just get handed to you like it does in some of those places.
Interesting. What can we do to foster better communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I think about all the time. You see it all the time with religious people. There is community, whether it's cultural. The more we go away from religion, we need to find something to replace that sense of community. And it's a hard one. I don't know if I have the answer, but everyone needs to find their tribe, I think, and come up with like-minded people. So, whether it's joining a bird watching group or whatever, I think it's really important that we do try to find that sense of community and not isolate ourselves, because community is very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think loneliness is one of our biggest diseases in the West.
Yeah, I think as a species, on a biological level, we're a social group species. So I think that we definitely need to remember that we are just an animal, and the reason that we get lonely, it's biology. And you got to listen to that.
Well, as a chef, what's your specialty bush food?
Oh, specialty bush food. I mean, I've cooked all sorts of. I've spent a lot of time with Aboriginal people. I've been extremely fortunate to. I spent a lot of time with the old ladies in particular, downloading that few thousand generations of knowledge of what's edible in the bush. So, ethnobotany, and coming from a chefic background, I'm super interested in what food's available. And I've learnt language and learnt what's edible. So I try to incorporate as much stuff in the bushes with the things I cook from the bush, and incorporate that knowledge. But over the last few years, I've strangely become known as the cane toad guy.
The cane toad guy. You're eating cane toads?
Yeah. So a few years ago, I was in Singapore, and the old aunties, they were cooking up cane toads. I looked at it in the markets. I thought, that's cane toads. It's a toxic species. So I asked them, can you show me how to prepare them? And it was simple. You cut the legs off, peel the skin off. You've got these meaty legs. The buffo toxins are in the skin. So when I went back home, I thought, I've got to try this. And I cooked them up and filmed it as part of a video, and it just went ballistic. Next minute, Mona Gallery down in Tasmania is ringing me up, wanting me to be a part of an exhibition called Eat the Problem. And I started,
Wow.
I thought, utilizing an invasive species and using that as a platform to talk about the impacts of invasive species as well. Now known as the cane toad guy. Just the other day, I took down 20 frozen cane toads from Townsville down to Hobart, and filmed cleaning and cooking up cane toads down in Tasmania. So I never thought I'd be doing that, but yeah, I don't know if it's a speciality, but it's something I've been doing.
That's incredible. That sounds like a speciality to me. And I love the concept of eating the problem. I mean, I wish we could eat all of our problems. Okay, what's your favorite bush food then?
Favorite bush food? Magpie geese. I mean, as far as meat, magpie geese, there's 3 million magpie geese in the top end. And they're not so common over in Queensland, and they used to be found all the way down to Victoria. So in the East Coast, they're protected. But because we still have our wetlands in the top end, and we really look after the numbers of magpie geese, there's a season for hunting geese. And Monimunak or Bomaru, there's a couple of their language names in Aboriginal languages. And it's like wagyu of the sky, almost like roast lamb. It's unlike any bird you've ever had. Cooked on the fire, when it's nice and fat at the end of the season, you only ever hunt it in the right time. It's just extraordinary. I dream about it.
Really? Okay. It's something I got to try. I got to try it. Okay, well, this is another question I ask all my guests. It's what are you working on about yourself right now in any capacity?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Well, at the moment over in Townsville, I'm jumping into disability support work. So something I've never done before. So it'll be a whole new chapter. Who knows how long I'll be doing it for. It's the wet season at the moment, so tourism shuts down in the top end, and I'm always looking for something interesting to do. So yeah, being a support to people in the community that need that bit of help and support, that's something I'm definitely going to be working on myself and working to help others.
That's absolutely beautiful. And finally, before we end off, is there a message or a piece of wisdom you think the world needs to hear?
Yeah, another great question. Uh, I think I'm going to go back to everybody remembering that idea that we are just one species of animal on a planet full of animals, no more or less important than any other animal. And one thing I just wish everybody could tap into, that idea that I think one of the biggest impacts we can have on the natural world is inviting wildlife back in. So most people that are listening to this are going to be living in cities. Some aren't going to have a backyard at all, but a lot of people have a backyard. Get out to a local nursery, plant, native species. I've got 250 species of native plants in my Townsville suburban garden, and watch the wildlife come back in. Watch the birds and the lizards, and I've got a pond, so I've got frogs arriving. Invite that wildlife back in. If we could all plant a few native species in our backyard, we could create these urban forests and go back to living a bit more as part of nature, not looking at nature as being an inconvenience. I think that's something I'd like to see everyone think a bit more about.
That's inspiring. And as someone who was planning on concreting over their backyard, I mean, I think that maybe that's exactly what I needed to hear at the right time. So, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are such an insightful and caring person, and just thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your experiences. Where can people find your amazing footage and messages?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've started an Instagram channel. It's been doing pretty well. People seem to enjoy seeing a bit of those remote wild parts of the top end. It's David Mcmahon Australia. That's TikTok and Instagram. And I've got a YouTube channel that I put some longer form documentary stuff, David McMahon Going Bush. And if anyone ever wants to come up north and come out on a tour, Venture North Safaris. I love the opportunity to take as many people out. It's not my business. I just work for it. But I just love taking people out and showing them these really wild parts of Northern Australia and opening their eyes to how Indigenous Australians live.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.